Joan of Arc took a stand by going against the society's norms and the gender roles assigned to her. She took a leadership role and fought for what she believed was her divine duty, despite the obstacles of being poor, uneducated, and a woman.
France was involved in a long-running war with England, known as the 100 Years' War.
The Hundred Years' War was a long-lasting conflict between France and England over whether England's Henry VI or France's Charles VII would get the throne of France. The war lasted from 1337 to 1453. Since Burgundians held the city of Reims, where traditional coronation ceremonies are held, Charles VII was unable to reach Reims to be crowned King of France. Joan of Arc was born around January 6, 1412. She grew up learning housekeeping skills and Catholicism. Around 1424, Joan had a vision from God in her father's garden, telling her to join the army of France. She then took it upon herself to carry out that divine duty and left her home in an attempt to get support to lead an army to fight off English invaders and lead the Dauphin Charles VII to Reims so he could be crowned King of France.
In May 1428, Joan's visions instructed her to go to Vaucluse and to contact Robert de Brodecourt, the garrison commander and a supporter of Charles. At first, Brodecourt refused Joan's request, but after seeing that she was gaining the approval of the villagers, in 1429 he gave in and gave her a horse and an escort of several soldiers. Joan cropped her hair and dressed in men's clothes for her 11-day journey across enemy territory to Chinon, the site of Charles' court. At first, Charles was not certain what to make of this peasant girl who asked her for an audience and professed that she could have saved France. Joan, however, won him over when she correctly identified him, dressed incognito, in a crowd of members of his court. The two had private conversation, during which it is said Jones revealed the details of solemn prayer Charles had made to God to save France. On the other hand, this did not totally convince him that Joan has had a vision that was enacted by God or was appointed by him. Still tentative, Charles had prominent theologians examine and question her. The clergyman reported they found nothing improper with Joan, only being religious, and a sense of humility was there.
Although Charles VII was hesitant about Joan attempting to fight off Burgundian and English forces, he still granted her the control of a small army, and from there she led her army to Orleans, France, where the English had been conducting a 7-month siege. Joan's presence was known, and she was fighting as bravely as the men around her. According to a different perspective, Joan was influenced by her voices to lead the final attack on the English, even after being wounded. During the time from May 4th through May 7th, 1429, the French troops took control of the English fortifications. French forces had already driven the English from one of the 3 towns by the time reinforcements arrived. Joan had challenged gender roles by showing that as a woman she too had the capability of leading a victorious army, which was unheard of back then. On June 18, 1429, Joan went on to have French forces overwhelm English forces at the Battle of Patay. Once the French were victorious, Joan had to convince Charles to trust her strategy of disbanding any resistance so he can swiftly make his way 150 miles to Reims for his coronation to become King of France. Charles and his procession finally entered Reims, and he was crowned the King of France on July 18, 1429. Joan was at his side, and she was now able to call him King Charles VII. Joan of Arc is remembered as a legendary figure because once she was able to break the barriers of being uneducated and a woman, she dressed in men's attire and took on a crucial leadership role during the 100 Years' War. With that being evident, King Charles VII acknowledged her feats of valor and her good reputation among France's people, So he wrote a letter regarding a coat of arms that would be bestowed onto her and her family, raising Joan of Arc to nobility status. Months later, Joan of Arc continues the campaign against the English and Burgundians, in an attempt to have them surrender under the rightful king, King Charles. On May 12, 1430, Joan and her army reached Compiègne, France, to assault Burgundian forces, but they resisted, and it is said that she fell off her horse and was captured. Joan was held captive and then put on trial as a heretic because of her claims of having divine revelations. Almost a year later, on January 13, 1431, Joan's trial begins and she is charged with claiming the divine revelation and in placing more reliance on such supposed revelation than on the authority of the church, immodesty in wearing male clothes, and inaccuracy in suggesting that saints speak French rather than English. Her charges added up to about 70, and the general name for all her offenses is heresy, which is defined as being unorthodox in any way. On May 29, 1431, Joan was burned at the stake after months of interrogations, in which she remained fixed in her beliefs and experiences, resulting in her public death in the hands of the English. Joan proved that she was willing to commit and die for her vision. King Charles doubted her abilities, but then showed she was able to lead a victorious army and hold an honorable reputation while not being confined to the gender roles of the time. Joan had the difficulties of being uneducated and not being trusted because she was a woman, but ever since she has shown to be a legendary figure in France. After 500 years of her lingering impacts on France, in 1920, May 16th, Pope Benedict XV canonizes, which is to announce Joan of Arc as saint. Joan of Arc's uprising can be seen to have had an influence on women since her time, and to the present day, by going against social norms and limitations that are still set today. Joan of Arc's actions foreshadow what the present day is like. Women are free to be a part of the military alongside of men, and even though women's rights and equality is still being fought for, there has been a lot of progress towards making the idea of who Joan of Arc was become universally accepted.